My name is Dr. Arun Kumar. I am a second year vascular surgery resident in Sri Ramachandra Medical College, Chennai. Today I'm going to present about cerebrovascular disease, its epidemiology and natural history. Coming to introduction of stroke, it's also called as cerebral infarction and is the acute development of focal neurological deficit caused by disruption of blood supply to an area of brain. There are Okay, a stroke can be ischemic or hemorrhagic, as we all know. Ischemic when there is occlusion of blood vessels or other cause of malperfusion, or hemorrhagic when there is a rupture of blood vessels, and there is intracerebral. Hemorrhage can be intracerebral or hemorrhage, which is bleeding into the brain parenchyma, or it could be subarachnoid, where there can be bleeding in the subarachnoid space. Uh, Okay. Now, coming to definition of stroke, there is acute neurological dysfunction of vascular etiology with corresponding signs and symptoms lasting for more than 24 hours, resulting from infarction of focal area of brain. Ischemic stroke related to carotid artery can be presented with sudden contralateral sensory motor loss, speech deficit, or ipsilateral monocular blindness. So the full clinical impact of stroke, which is generally not apparent up to almost until 2 weeks because of ischemic penumbra, which either recovers or which succumbs to the infarction. Main treatment is supportive care and rehabilitation following stroke, allows some or significant recovery in many patients. But in many of these patients, there are long-lasting effects. It's if not permanent, due to cerebral parenchyma, which is irrecoverably lost. Coming to acute treatment of acute stroke, acute treatment is generally or historically generally supportive and medical line of management. Role of open or endovascular treatment in acute ischemic stroke is related to carotid artery occlusive disease is controversial and its indication is uncertain at present. Recent studies show that there is improved functional outcome in patients who have undergone endovascular intervention in conjunction of thrombolysis with a defined period of time within a defined period of time of symptom onset, which is generally said to be around 4.5 hours. Its widespread application is limited because of its practical and logistic point of view, because of the it should intervene as soon as possible, but this is not practically possible always. Right now the principal strategy for treatment of this cerebrovascular disease against the cerebrovascular disease is primary prevention of stroke. So, coming to prevalence of stroke, it is estimated in 2013 that there are about 25.7 million cases all over the world, and in 2000, 10.3 million people experiencing stroke for the first time in 2013. Stroke causes 5.5 million deaths all over the world and over 44 million disabilities every year. It varies with population studies and is related to age, ethnicity, sex, and risk profile. Prevalence of stroke in India shows a huge variation between 147 to 927 cases across diverse community-based studies. Indian stroke fact sheet updated in 2012 estimated to be around 84 to 262 per 1 lakh population in rural and 334 to 424 per 1 lakh population in urban areas. In the stroke incidence, there were four published population-based stroke epidemiological studies according to WHO STEPS protocol, stroke protocol, which were conducted in different areas of India in the 21st century, in the first decade of 21st century, which showed a age standardized incidence of rate of first ever stroke to be between 134 to 152 per 1 lakh population per persons per year, depending on the area. So there is said to be that there is a declining prevalence and incidence of stroke in the last 50 years, which is supported by three studies, which is well documented. Rothwell et al. Reported a decrease in stroke incidence of nearly 40% between 1980s to the year of 2000 in the United Kingdom. And American Heart Association reported that lifetime risk of stroke in a 65-year-old male decreased from 19.5% 50 years ago to 14.5% in 2013. In the United States, the Framingham cohorts in Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky stroke study also found that there is a declining stroke incidence in the past 50 years. Coming to the why this declining, it is generally theorized that it is because of the medical line of management. The previous randomized trials have demonstrated there is a clear benefit of surgical therapy and with carotid endarterectomy over medical line of management to prevent stroke in an asymptomatic and previously symptomatic patient with severe extracranial intracranial internal carotid artery stenosis. But the treatment with statins has generally shown a stroke reduction and is also reflected in a meta-analysis of more than 90,000 patients. The relative reduction was found to be around of stroke was found to be around 21%. And this why how this acts is generally unknown, but it is said to reduce the carotid intimal medial thickness of the carotid vessels by using the statin therapy. A recent meta-analysis also showed that using statin therapy at acute stroke was associated with improved late outcome, both at functional independence and the survival when it was started at stroke. And a statin for primary prevention of stroke is less conclusive. It is more for secondary prevention, the statin use. As I told you, that the exact role of statin therapy is right now unclear, especially in severe carotid occlusive disease with regard to stroke prevention. So the current guidelines for recommendation of statin therapy for the prevention of first stroke in high-risk patients are where LDL levels are greater than 4.1 millimoles per liter, and males older than 45 and females aged more than 55 with the following risk factors such as positive family history, smoking, hypertension, and left ventricular hypertrophy. The report, which was authorized by the American Heart Association Stroke Council, it declined, clearly showed that there is a decline of mortality related to stroke. But as which was I told you, they said it is because of treatment of hypertension rather than lipid lowering treatment. This epidemiological study also showed that elevated blood pressure is the most important determinant of risk of stroke. The improved treatment of hypertension is the most likely important factor that has contributed to the decline of stroke mortality, according to this report. And coming to the risk factor per se of stroke, as we all know, men are in men it is more prevalent, and in women there is a higher percentage of stroke mortalities, maybe because of the greater longevity of the longevity in females. And there's increasing age is the major risk factor, and for each decade after 55 years, the risk of stroke approximately doubles. Black and Hispanics have shown to have the first, the increased incidence compared to other races, but this increased stroke may be because of hypertension, intracranial disease, rather than because of carotid artery occlusive disease. Hypertension, like I told you, blood pressure less than 120 by 80 mmHg have a lifetime risk which is reduced to half in subjects with when compared to subjects with hypertension. The so-called intensive blood pressure control, as opposed to standard treatment, has also resulted in lowered the risk of stroke. Strict blood pressure control can also reduce the risk of recurrent stroke. Though paternal history of stroke, TIA, and myocardial infarction has shown to increase the risk by 1.4 to 3.3 folds of having a stroke, and atrial fibrillation has 3 to 5 folds increase of cardioembolic ischemic stroke. Current smoking has 2 to 4 times increased stroke risk when compared to non-smokers and who have quit smoking for more than 10 years. And this 25% increase in total cholesterol levels of around 38.7 mg per deciliter increase, with each 38.7 mg increase is seen with hypercholesterolemia. But not all trials have concluded this, but there's no good correlation between hypercholesterolemia and ischemic stroke at present. Physical activity increased leisure time physical activity is shown to be protective against stroke. In regards trial, physical activity which showed 4 times a week had a 20% increase, which physical activity less than 20%, physical activity less than 4 times a week has a 20% increase of stroke as compared to those who exercise for more than 4 times a week. Diabetes is a risk factor for ischemic stroke in all ages. The most significant increase occurs in patients who are less than 65 years. It doubles the risk of stroke among patients with diabetes as compared with others and who have others who have normal glucose control. It is significant in women than in men. Uh, we all know that protective relationship between fruits and vegetable consumption is seen with a reduction of stroke incidence. And this Mediterranean style of food, which with nuts and olives, have also shown to reduce the incidence of stroke. And abdominal obesity and ischemic stroke have shown a good association and correlation. And increased consumption of alcohol, which is irregular binge drinking, also increases the risk of stroke. And there is moderate drinking is associated with decreased risk of ischemic stroke. Mild to moderate renal insufficiency is an independent predictor of ischemic stroke in both asymptomatic patients and patients with peripheral arterial disease. An interstroke study, which was done in 2010, reported in 22 countries worldwide, which showed that patients with acute stroke, when were compared with control with no history of stroke and were matched for both age and sex. 5 factors accounted for more than 80% of the global risk of all the ischemic strokes, where hypertension was the most important risk factor. Current smoking, abdominal obesity, poor diet, and physical inactivity were also considered one of the important risk factors associated with stroke. Now, coming to the natural history of ischemic stroke, so the carotid artery interventions are performed to prevent further strokes. It is essential to understand that the natural history of carotid disease and stroke and TIA in order to properly assess the risk factor and the benefit of potential interventions in patients who can develop stroke. Because the outcome of stroke following an ischemic stroke, where the recurrent stroke can happen in 2% at 7 days, 4% at 30 days, 12% at 1 year, and 29% at 5 years. And the risk of death after the initial stroke is almost 7% at 7 days, 14% at 30 days, and 27% at 1 year, and 53% at 5 years. So the ischemic stroke survivors were 65 years or older, and the following disabilities were observed in 6 months after the stroke. 50% had hemiparesis, 30% were unable to walk without assistance, 26% were dependent in their daily activity, 19% had aphasia, and 35% had depressive symptoms, and 26% of them were institutionalized. The impact of stroke from the CREST data showed that the estimated 4-year mortality after stroke was 21.1%, compared with 11.6% for those who without stroke, and including those who had undergone carotid revascularization. Stroke may also be associated with long-term cognitive decline. Acute stroke is associated with accelerated and permanent cognitive decline over 6 years. The Northern American symptomatic carotid endarterectomy trial also showed the randomized symptomatic carotid artery and high-grade carotid stenosis, where ipsilateral stroke rate was 26% at 2 years. Major or fatal ipsilateral stroke occurred in 13.1% patients. In 32-day period following randomization of medically treated symptomatic patients, 3.3 were experienced stroke or death. Now coming to transient ischemic attack, it is also called as mini stroke colloquially, and is a neurological event that presents with stroke-like symptoms for less than 24 hours duration. Majority of these symptoms last for only few minutes. It is a warning telltale sign for a future stroke. 30% of these TIAs go on to suffer stroke within the next 5 years. And TIA are generally short-lived and resolves upon restoration of flow into the brain and returns to the neurological baseline, which was there before the symptoms occurred. It is a clinical diagnosis rather than a radiological diagnosis. And although neurological baseline is restored within 24 hours, cell death may have occurred. The carotid supplies the anterior circulation. Injury to the where the injury to the brain parenchyma occurs from the anterior cerebral artery or the middle cerebral artery regions which supply to the brain. The symptoms may be motor symptoms where it can range from mild hemiparesis to complete hemiparalysis, contralateral to the affected hemisphere. Sensory may be mild numbness to complete paresthesia, again contralateral to extremity. Language loss, dysarthria, dysphagia, and aphasia with the when the dominant hemisphere is affected, and amaurosis fugax, where transient monolocular blindness or field cut when there is embolization into the retinal artery through the ophthalmic artery. Now, it is important to know that unlike the thromboembolism of cardiac origin, carotid emboli tends to present with TIAs rather than stroke. And TIA of carotid origin tends to occur at the same vascular territory, hence giving the same symptoms rather than cardioembolic origin, which shows haphazard location and which gives you different symptomatology. Now, coming to prevalence of TIA, incidence of TIA increases with age and sex and race and ethnicity, varies with sex and race and ethnicity. Approximately 15% of all the strokes are preceded by TIA, and there is significant risk of subsequent stroke in the short term. And among a cohort of patients which was seen in ER in the United States with TIA, 11% experienced a subsequent stroke within 90 days and 5% experienced a subsequent stroke within the next 2 days. The true prevalence of TIA is higher than what is reported. Coming to the natural history of TIA, the presence and the diagnosis of TIA is found in the setting of ipsilateral and appropriate severity of carotid artery disease. It offers the practitioners to take an opportunity and to intervene and prevent the subsequent stroke. And there are some independent predictors which show for the subsequent TIA development. These are age greater than 60 years, diabetes mellitus, presence of focal symptoms, and TIAs that last for more than 10 minutes. Individuals who experience TIA and survive the initial high risk period have a 10-year stroke risk of about 19%. Two meta-analysis of TIA patients reported that the short-term risk of stroke following TIA was similar. That is around 3 to 10% at 2 days and 9 to 7% at 90 days, the risk of a stroke after TIA. There is a substantial risk of ischemic stroke following TIA, where the patients with these are the patients. The patients who are at more risk of developing stroke are the patients who have developed focal hemispherical symptoms and should be evaluated for the presence of any carotid artery disease so that patient can be intervened and treated to prevention of future further stroke. Now, coming to carotid artery extracranial carotid artery atherosclerosis, the pathophysiology, atherosclerotic plaque in the carotid artery causes a substantial proportion of ischemic strokes. The mechanism is less well understood as compared to those of acute coronary thrombosis. Carotid artery plaque can cause TIA or stroke by these two main mechanisms. Either it is atherombolism or hypoperfusion. Atherombolism of debris originating from the carotid artery plaque and travels to the brain of the to be predominant cause of both TIA and ischemic stroke to the carotid artery. Whereas hypoperfusion occurs when there is severe multivessel disease of both carotid and vertebral artery territories, can lead to hypoperfusion and give the symptoms of TIA or stroke. The severity of carotid artery stenosis. The severity of carotid artery stenosis in symptomatic patients is the most important predictor of benefit from carotid artery intervention. There are other factors of predictive of stroke, such as ulcerated appearance present on carotid angiography and duplex ultrasonography. Now we can't wait for the stenosis to become symptomatic because it fails the main motto of preventing another stroke. So there's a critical need to improve the selection of asymptomatic patients for carotid intervention and to improve the potential effectiveness for the treatment of stroke and prevention, which is not there at present. So we should be able to evaluate the presence of vulnerable plaque in the patients who are increased risk for ischemic stroke. A vulnerable plaque is often used to describe an unstable plaque or a plaque prone to complications, including embolization and subsequent stroke. The asymptomatic carotid artery stenosis and risk stroke study group determined the risk stratification for these based on baseline degree of stenosis, critical clinical features, and ultrasound plaque characteristics in patients with asymptomatic carotid artery stenosis. This was a prospective cohort study. Over 1,000 patients were included, where the 50 to 99% asymptomatic ICS stenosis were followed for 6 to 96 months. And they evaluate the characteristics which had increased risk of ipsilateral cerebral or retinal ischemic events. These were severity of stenosis, age, higher age, systolic blood pressure, higher systolic blood pressure, increased creatinine levels, patient who are present smokers with more than 10 pack years, history of contralateral TIA or stroke, and ultrasound features such as low grayscale medium and increased plaque area and absence of discrete white areas without acoustic shadowing. Now, we'll come to transcranial Doppler, its importance and its drawbacks for in the management of stroke. Thromboembolism is generally regarded as the mechanism of ischemic stroke in patients with carotid bifurcation atherosclerosis. Detection of subclinical embolization may help to identify the patients who may develop stroke in the future and treat them beforehand. This transcranial Doppler testing involves detection of microemboli in the middle cerebral artery using transcranial Doppler isonation, as shown in the picture through the acoustic shadow. And different blood vessels different blood vessels to the brain can be seen, and this is done to detect a high intensity transient signals hits, and it is felt to represent the microemboli to the brain. This is the as Aromax show. These are the transient high intensity signals, which may denote that it could be presence of microemboli. Detection only it is only detected when there is embolic source, and generally it's absent days after carotid endarterectomy and absent in control without carotid stenosis. So it is said to it is suggested to give a relationship between carotid artery atherosclerotic plaque and microembolisms. This high intensity transient signals frequency rises with increasing stenosis, and increasing rates of high intensity transient signals is associated with plaque ulceration. This emphasizes the likely association with hits and plaque instability. The asymptomatic carotid emboli study, the detection of embolic signals were used in transcranial Doppler to predict the stroke risk in patients with asymptomatic carotid diseases. Here, 267 patients were included. It was a prospective observational study, and the stenosis of at least 70% were followed for a period of 2 weeks. And the primary endpoint for this study was ipsilateral stroke or TIA development. The embolic signals were present in 77 patients at baseline, and there was an annual risk of ipsilateral stroke or TIA was 7.13% with patients with embolic signals and 3.04% in those without the embolic signals. For stroke alone, the annual risk of 3.62% in presence of signals and 0.7% those without the signals. The author concluded that it can be used to identify patients with asymptomatic carotid stenosis who are at a higher risk of stroke and TIA and who may benefit from carotid intervention. Unfortunately, there are some drawbacks to this, as it's not a practical tool in a widespread scale, because it is a very highly time consuming in nature, and it is not reliable automated embolic detection system, and it is operator dependent, and a small proportion, around 10% of patients, lack the acoustic window needed for the transcranial Doppler to be performed. Now, coming to the types of stroke and relationship of stroke to carotid artery atherosclerosis, it's generally classified by TOAST classification, and this classified into 5: cardioembolic stroke, large vessel disease stroke, stroke due to small vessel disease, stroke related to unusual causes, and stroke of undetermined etiology. Based on clinical and in this TOAST classification is based on clinical and radiological findings, as well as additional investigations such as duplex ultrasonography, ECG, echocardiography, and blood testing. Clinical studies on stroke subtypes fail to identify a definitive cause of stroke in at least 25 to 39% of patients. Large vessel disease causes stroke in 50% of cases, but small vessel disease is said to be more frequent than large vessel disease in the in present studies. Coming to epidemiology of extracranial carotid artery atherosclerosis, the prevalence in Trosmo study, 7,000 adults were aged 25 to 84 years, where ICS stenosis was detected in 3.8% of males and 2.7% of females. And the prevalence increased with age, total cholesterol, systemic blood pressure, and cigarette smoking, which are the risk factors. And another population-based study was done with older, healthy patients with age 60 to 79 years, where prevalence of ICS stenosis was estimated to be 10.5% in male and 5.5% women by doing duplex examination. A meta-analysis accumulated a large population report in 2010 showed that overall prevalence of moderate range carotid stenosis varied from 0.2% in male over 50 years and 7.5% in males over 80 years. That means the increase of age increased the prevalence of carotid stenosis, and prevalence was lower in women. And there's a said to be higher prevalence of carotid stenosis when patient has lower extremity peripheral arterial disease. It is denoted by this figure, which says that lower the ankle brachial index, where there was higher prevalence of carotid artery stenosis also present. Now, there are some, as we all know, there are some modified risk factors such as hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, smoking, diabetes, and sedentary lifestyle. We can see in all these peripheral vascular disease and carotid artery stenosis or abdominal aortic aneurysm, the more the number of modifiable risk factors present for the patient, more is the incidence of disease. Come to the natural history of stroke or TIA. When a patient has already experienced an initial TIA or a non-disabling stroke in carotid territory, there is little disagreement that the prompt intervention and appropriate carotid lesion is warranted to decrease the otherwise extremely high risk of a subsequent infarction. But where the debate is that when the patient is asymptomatic carotid atherosclerosis, which patient will need a treatment, and who will develop the cerebrovascular symptoms in the future. So the challenge for the role of carotid endarterectomy in the treatment of asymptomatic stenosis may be twofold, at two categories. That in the view that the modern optimal medical therapy may allow better stroke protection and always the need for intervention. And the argument that degree of stenosis alone is a poor surrogate for vulnerable plaque and does not allow the accurate prediction of patients at a high risk for stroke. So the carotid intervention should only be undertaken in asymptomatic patients who have a higher lifetime risk of stroke. In addition to age, sex, degree of stenosis, medical comorbidities, and life expectancy, relevant factors include that severity of stenosis, progression of stenosis, and evidence of infarction on brain imaging and plaque imaging characteristics. Consistent rate of stroke risk of approximately 2% per year in patients with higher grade stenosis were seen in various studies. And the progression of carotid stenosis has been shown to be significant predictor of stroke in risk in multiple natural history studies. In ACSR's group follow-up study, patients with 50 to 99% stenosis were analyzed, and the mean follow-up was 4 years. And the progression occurred in 19.8% of patients, around 20% of patients. Total of 130 patients, first ipsilateral cerebral or retinal event occurred, including 59 strokes. So this 59 strokes patients, out of that 40 strokes were present in patients whose stenosis was not changed, and 19% strokes occurred in patients in those with progress. So basically, in the 50 to 99% stenosis category, 40% had no progression of stenosis and 19% had progression of stenosis. Whereas in patient with baseline stenosis, which when they take the category of 70 to 99% stenosis, 8-year cumulative risk in the absence of progression, the ipsilateral stroke rate was 12%, whereas in presence of progression, it had increased to 21%. So more greater the stenosis, there is a greater risk of progression of the carotid plaque and ischemic stroke event. So coming to the next topic, vertebrobasilar insufficiency. Vertebral artery origin stenosis occurs in around 20% of posterior circulation ischemic strokes. Symptoms may be caused by occlusion of stenosis of subclavian artery, which may lead to subclavian steal syndrome, where when there is stenosis proximal to the origin of vertebral artery, it can be either embolic. The vertebrobasilar insufficiency could be either embolic, thrombotic, or low flow hemodynamic mechanisms. Indications for surgery or endovascular treatment for vertebral artery disease is not clearly defined, unlike those defined for carotid artery occlusive disease. So the vertebrobasilar insufficiency results in ischemia to the posterior circulation of brain of the vascular territory supplied with a paired vertebral and common basilar artery. Of this, 20% of all TI, the vertebrobasilar insufficiency is about 20% of all the TIs in stroke is either due to occlusion or hemodynamic mechanism resulting in hypoperfusion. The most common cause of vertebral insufficiency is large artery atherosclerosis, emboli, penetrating small artery disease, and arterial dissection. A cerebellar infarction usually results in vertigo, vomiting, blurred vision, and difficulty in walking. Now, coming to global cerebral ischemia. Global ischemia or systemic hypoperfusion represents only a small fraction of all the ischemic strokes for carotid occlusive disease. It often presents with unconsciousness at an emergency room or with symptoms resembling near syncope. These neurological symptoms can be varied and usually be attributed to decreased perfusion to the watershed areas in the brain in cerebral circulation. Described as described as decreased visual acuity, cognitive difficulty, bilateral upper limb weakness, and symptoms of vertebrobasilar insufficiency can also be possible. It can be result of prolonged cardiogenic shock, dysrhythmias, and cardiac arrest. Treatment should generally focus on the cardiac failure and improving perfusion pressures to the brain. Coming to the next topic, lacunar infarcts. It is defined as a small subcortical infarct that results from presumed occlusion of a single penetrating artery of the brain. These arteries are thought to be so small that they cannot be readily imaged in vivo. So these lesions are presumed to be ischemic in etiology. Ischemic in etiology, okay, represents roughly 20% of all the ischemic strokes. It consists of small 1 to 2 centimeters subcortical defects as shown in the picture and often located in the internal capsule or the basal ganglia. These are generally the areas supplied by the lenticulostriate vessels, and these are small proximal branches of internal carotid artery. So the typical presentations can include pure motor hemiparesis, pure sensory syndrome, sensory motor syndrome, ataxia hemiparesis, and dysarthria, clumsy hand syndrome. From a clinical perspective, lacunar infarcts can easily mimic carotid artery disease and related ischemic events. The lacunar infarcts may be present in as many as 23% of the persons over 65 years of age, remain asymptomatic or silent in up to 89% of the patients. So the association between this atherosclerotic extracranial lesion and lacunar infarcts is controversial, which do not support are when there is small vessel disease deep in the brain resulting due to long-standing hypertension or diabetes, which is unrelated to carotid occlusive disease, is consistent with the variable pattern of distribution of lacunar infarcts. But there are recent studies which say that ICS stenosis of more than 70% were found more commonly in the side of lacunar infarcts and the associated large vessel disease in up to one third of the patients. To support that theory, embolization of carotid atherosclerosis to the lenticulostriate vessels may contribute to lacunar infarcts in only some cases, not in all cases. Coming to cognitive decline, the last topic for today. The another stroke is, although stroke is a well-established cause of dementia, relationship between carotid stenosis itself and cognitive impairment is less clear. A systemic review for literature found in 18 studies showed that 14 studies showed that deficit in patients carotid stenosis patient had cognitive decline,
where four studies showed there was no cognitive impairment with cerebral ischemia. But then cognitive function is rarely considered in evaluating treating carotid stenosis. And this cognitive decline can be either again because of two mechanisms, either atheroembolism or due to hypoperfusion, as explained before. Thank you.